My name's Emily Carter. I live in a small town in upstate New York, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens. People go about their quiet lives, and the most scandalous thing you'll hear is Mrs. Beasley accusing someone of stealing her prize-winning tomatoes. But last month, my life turned into something I still can't explain. It started with a phone call. It was a Friday night, and I was home alone. My parents had gone to visit my aunt in Albany, leaving me in charge of the house. I didn't mind. I was 16, almost 17, and I liked having the place to myself. I was curled up on the couch, watching some mindless reality show, when the landline rang. Yes, we still have a landline. My mom says it's just in case, though no one ever uses it. I stared at it for a moment, confused. No one calls that number except telemarketers, and they usually don't bother this late. I picked it up, expecting silence or some automated voice offering to lower our interest rates. But instead, I heard something that made my skin crawl. It was breathing. Slow, steady breathing. Hello, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. Just breathing. Is this some kind of prank? Because it's not funny, I snapped, my heart pounding. The breathing stopped. For a moment, I thought whoever it was had hung up, but then they spoke. Emily, the voice said. It wasn't loud. In fact, it was barely above a whisper, but there was something about the way they said my name, calm, deliberate, that made me freeze. Who is this? I demanded, my voice shaking. They didn't answer. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, staring at the phone like it might explain what had just happened. Then I hung up and told myself it was probably just some kid messing around. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The next night, it happened again. This time, I didn't pick up. I let it ring and ring until it finally stopped. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when my phone buzzed. A text. It was from an unknown number, and it said 2 words, "Answer me." My hands were shaking as I typed back, "Who is this?" A few seconds later, another text came through. "You know who I am." No, I didn't. At least, I didn't think I did. I spent the rest of the night staring at my phone, waiting for another text or call, but nothing else came. By the time I finally went to bed, I'd convinced myself it was a mistake. Maybe someone had the wrong number. But when I woke up the next morning, I found something that shattered that theory completely. It was a photo left on the front porch. The picture was of my house, taken the night before. And in the corner of the photo, standing just outside the living room window, was a shadowy figure. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The photo haunted me. The figure outside the window wasn't clear. It was blurry, like they'd moved just as the picture was taken, but there was no mistaking the shape of a person. Someone had been watching me. By morning, I was a mess. My mind was spinning with questions. Who were they? Why me? How did they know my name? I wanted to tell someone, my parents, my best friend. But every time I picked up my phone, I stopped. I didn't have proof. Sure, there was the photo, but what would I say? Hey, someone's stalking me, and they're weirdly good at taking creepy pictures of my house. Instead, I decided to handle it myself. I spent the day trying to act normal, but my nerves were shot. By the time the sun went down, I had a plan, or at least what I thought was a plan. I was going to stay up all night, keep my phone close, and wait. If they came back, I'd catch them in the act. The house was dark and silent. I sat by the window in the living room, the blinds cracked just enough for me to see the street. My phone was in my lap, the camera app open and ready. Hours passed, midnight came and went. I told myself it was a waste of time, that no one would be stupid enough to come back after leaving a photo like that. And then I saw it. A shadow moved across the yard. My heart leapt into my throat as I squinted into the darkness. There was someone out there. They weren't near the window this time. They were by the edge of the trees, just standing there, half hidden by the branches. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I tried to zoom in. The screen was too dark to make out any details, but I could tell they were watching me. I couldn't sit there anymore. I needed answers. Grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen, I flung the door open and stepped onto the porch. "Who are you?" I shouted into the night. "What do you want?" The figure didn't move. They just stood there, completely still. "Stay away from me," I yelled, trying to sound braver than I felt. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but when I aimed it at the trees, the figure was gone. No movement, no sound, just empty shadows. I went back inside, locking every door and window in the house. My heart was still racing as I sat back down on the couch, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. My phone buzzed. A text? "Why did you go outside?" The blood drained from my face. Whoever this was, they hadn't left. They were still out there, watching. I stared at the message, my mind racing, and then, for reasons I still can't explain, I replied, "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" The reply came almost instantly. "You know what you did." I didn't understand. What I did, what were they talking about? And then another text, "Check the basement." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. Check the basement. I wanted to ignore it, to throw my phone across the room and pretend I'd never read those words, but deep down, I knew I couldn't. There's a moment when fear becomes curiosity, and that's where I was. Whoever was tormenting me knew too much where I lived, what I looked like, even the layout of my house. I needed answers. Grabbing the flashlight again, I made my way to the basement door. It was one of those old wooden ones, painted white but peeling at the edges. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive. Like it's waiting. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The basement smelled like damp concrete and forgotten things. I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs, but nothing happened. Of course, with a deep breath, I aimed the flashlight down into the darkness. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended, each step louder than the last. At first, everything looked normal. Boxes of old Christmas decorations sat on the shelves, along with a broken vacuum cleaner and a dusty tool kit. The flashlight beam danced across the room, highlighting cobwebs and forgotten junk. But then I saw something that didn't belong. In the middle of the floor was a small wooden box. It was square, about the size of a shoebox, and completely out of place. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding. When I got close enough, I noticed something carved into the lid. A single word, "Emily." My breath caught in my throat. I knelt down, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The box wasn't locked, just sealed with an old, rusted latch. For a moment, I considered leaving it. Whatever was inside, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But the same pull that had brought me down here wouldn't let me stop. I flipped the latch and opened the lid. Inside was a stack of photographs. The first one was of me. It was taken in my bedroom sometime last week. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone, completely unaware that someone was watching me. The second photo was worse. It showed my parents sitting in the living room, laughing over dinner. This one wasn't recent. It had to be at least a year old. There were more photos of my friends, my house, my school. Whoever had taken these pictures had been following me for a long time. At the bottom of the stack was a note written in blocky, uneven handwriting. You forgot. But I didn't. A noise behind me snapped me out of my thoughts. It wasn't loud, just a soft creak, like the sound of someone shifting their weight. But it was enough to send my heart racing. I spun around, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice shaking. "Nothing," but then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The far wall of the basement was covered in plastic sheeting, the kind you see at construction sites. It hung loosely, swaying slightly as though someone had just passed through it. The noise came again, this time behind the plastic. I took a step forward, then another, the beam of the flashlight shaking as I approached the sheeting. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around and run, but I couldn't. When I was close enough, I reached out and pulled the plastic aside. Behind it was a door. It was metal, heavy, and covered in scratches, like something or someone had been trying to claw their way out. There was no handle, just a small keypad mounted on the wall beside it. The light from my flashlight caught something written above the keypad, scratched into the metal of the door. "Do you remember now?" The words on the door, "Do you remember now?" felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't remember. I didn't understand any of this. My fingers hovered over the keypad, but I didn't know the code. My breathing was ragged as my flashlight beam flickered, casting warped shadows on the walls. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it as I pulled it from my pocket. A text appeared on the screen from the same unknown number. "Try 0314. My stomach twisted. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching me, they were controlling everything. I stared at the keypad, the numbers glowing faintly in the darkness. I didn't want to press them. I didn't want to know what was behind that door, but I had no choice. I typed in the code, and with a loud click, the door unlocked. The air behind the door was colder, heavier, as though I'd stepped into a different world. My flashlight beam wavered as I took a step inside. The room was small, the walls lined with shelves filled with binders, old tapes, and stacks of photographs. A single desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers and a dusty laptop, and on the desk was another photograph. This one stopped me cold. It was of me, but not recent. I couldn't have been more than 8 years old, standing in the backyard of my childhood home. I picked it up, my mind spinning. I hadn't seen this photo in years. How did they have it? Beneath the photograph was a notebook. The cover was cracked and worn, but my name was scrawled across it in the same blocky handwriting as the note in the box. "Emily Carter, property of Project Echo." I flipped it open, my fingers shaking. Inside were pages and pages of notes, diagrams, even transcripts of conversations. My conversations, from phone calls to casual chats at school, it was all there. One page caught my eye. It was dated from last year, detailing a conversation I'd had with my parents at dinner. I didn't remember it exactly, but the words felt familiar enough to make my skin crawl. At the bottom of the page was a question written in bold letters, subject awareness. pending. Subject, awareness. What was this? The sound of footsteps snapped me out of my thoughts. They were soft at first, but growing louder, coming closer. I turned toward the door, my flashlight aimed at the hallway beyond. Who's there? I called out, my voice cracking. No response. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, just like the first phone call, and then a voice. "You shouldn't have come back, Emily." I froze. The voice was calm, cold, and impossibly familiar. "Who are you?" I demanded, my flashlight shaking. The figure stepped into the light, and my heart stopped. It was me. Not someone who looked like me, not a reflection. It was me, down to the clothes I was wearing and the expression on my face. They smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You still don't remember, do you?" they said, their tone almost pitying. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. This isn't real. This can't be real." They tilted their head, studying me like I was an insect under glass. "Project Echo," they said slowly. "You were part of it. A test subject. They erased your memory, but they couldn't erase me." "What are you talking about?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. They wanted to see how far they could go. They continued, their voice growing colder. "How much they could take before you broke. But I'm still here, Emily, and now I'm taking back what's mine." The lights flickered, and for a moment everything went black. When they came back on, the figure was gone. I don't remember how I got out of the house. The next thing I knew, I was standing on my front porch, the sun rising in the distance. My hands were empty, the flashlight and notebook gone. I tried to tell my parents what happened, but the words wouldn't come. How do you explain something like that? A week later, the house on Elm Street was gone. Not boarded up, not sold, just a gone, like it had never existed. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the voice. And I wonder if it's really gone or if it's waiting for me to remember.